One of the most attractive titles given to Jesus is Friend of Sinners. That title wasn't given to Jesus as a compliment, but rather as an insult. It's a shortened form of the phrase, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. If we want a reference for that, it's Luke chapter 7, verse 34. Now, we today can rejoice that Jesus has such a title because we are sinners, and therefore we can know Jesus as our friend. I'm sure we're all familiar with Luke chapter 15. It's the chapter where Jesus tells those three well-known parables about the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, or actually two lost sons, because the older brother who stayed at home was lost. Even though he stayed at home, he had no idea of what it meant to have a loving relationship with his father or with his younger brother. Do you remember how Luke chapter 15 begins? Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." Do you notice this chapter picks up on exactly the same theme as that verse from earlier on in Luke's Gospel? The Pharisees were complaining about Jesus because he was surrounded by tax collectors and sinners who wanted to hear him. So they said, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." Luke chapter 15, verse 2. The irony, of course, is that this is a good thing, not a bad thing. It's good that Jesus is the friend of sinners. He receives sinners and eats with them. Two great truths stand out for us from Luke chapter 15, one about ourselves and one about God. The truth about ourselves is that we are sinners. Without Jesus, we are lost. That is a very serious matter, as we know, because if we were to remain lost sinners, we would be separated from God forever, not just in this life, but beyond this life. If we are excluded from heaven, the only other destination for lost sinners is hell. So this is a very serious matter. Each of Jesus' stories in Luke chapter 15 focuses on different aspects of what it means to be a lost sinner. Let me run through them briefly, and I'm sure that we shall see something of ourselves the way we were before Jesus found us. People can be lost, like the sheep. And let's forget sentimental ideas of cuddly, woolly lambs. Sheep in the Bible are known for their stupidity and obstinacy. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. Sin is willfully, obstinately, stupidly going our own way, not the shepherd's way. People can be lost like the coin, by which I mean they can just slip away from where they should be and don't give a thought to eternal issues, content to lie undisturbed, perhaps enjoying being away from their rightful owner. People can be like the younger son, deliberately rebellious, kicking over the traces. People can be like the older son, who represents the Pharisees, priding themselves on their respectability and niceness, imagining that God will be pleased with them for their religion, believing that they have earned their way into God's favour, and yet they do not know what it is to have a relationship with God. They are far from home, lost. People today are lost if they have not been found by Jesus. There are plenty of lost sheep, lost coins, lost younger sons, lost older sons today, and all desperately needing to be found. So let's remember that we are sinners, and it is only by God's mercy that we are restored. Emperor Franz Joseph died in 1916. He was the Habsburg ruler of Austria and Hungary. On the day of his funeral, his coffin was taken to state to the Capuchin monastery in Vienna, where all the Habsburg rulers were buried. Now, what happened at the monastery gates had been planned in advance by the emperor before his death. When the herald knocked on the monastery gates, the abbot shouted from inside, "Who is knocking?" The herald replied, "I am Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria, King of Hungary, Bohemia," and all his other illustrious titles were proclaimed. The abbot replied, "I don't know you. Tell me again who you are." So the herald repeated what he had already said. Again the abbot replied, I still don't know you. Tell me again who you are. This time, as planned beforehand, the herald fell on his knees and he said, I am Franz Joseph, a poor sinner, humbly begging for God's mercy. And the doors of the monastery were thrown open. You see, the emperor had wanted to make a public statement about himself in relation to God. And what an amazing truth he was expressing. Whoever we are, we come to God as sinners, begging for mercy. The second great truth from Luke chapter 15 is about God, the fact that he is merciful and he loves us. I don't have time to develop this great truth further, but do read Luke chapter 15 again. Notice the joy in heaven, in other words, from God himself, when a sinner repents. Let's thank God that Jesus is the friend of sinners. And let's pray for those we know who are still lost, that they may know Jesus as their friend.